Hey, my name's James Bush. I coach and evaluate speakers. I help them become better speakers. I've got about 10 years in coaching. I started off coaching students for academia, helping them get the grades and study well ahead of university. So I bring all that experience coaching students, and I now help speakers to improve their confidence, delivery, their ability to write speeches, and their ability to deliver impactful messages. I'm going to go through an 8-step framework for how I look at speakers, and this is drawn heavily from Toastmasters, the international speaking organization. So we've got 8 dimensions. First off, speech development. Does this speech have a logical flow? Does it make sense? Could I follow the speaker? For example, does it have an introduction? Does it have a clear body? And does it have a conclusion? Those would be the 3 main elements I'm looking for. I'm also looking for elements like, is there a hook and something designed to take the audience's attention? And in the close, perhaps there's a quick summary, a recap point, or a call to action, some kind of inspiring call on how to apply the lessons learned in that speech. Let's go on to effectiveness. Point 2 is about purpose and impact. So every speech has a purpose. Perhaps it's to be persuasive, perhaps it's to be inspirational, and perhaps it's to be entertaining. Those are a few of your options. You might have a different purpose when speaking. You might just be there trying to connect. When I work out what a speaker's purpose is, perhaps they've let me know in advance, or I start working the purpose out as the speech unfolds, I can then say, has the speaker managed to bring about that purpose through this speech? Am I feeling persuaded? Does it look like people in the audience are inspired or entertained? Let's go on to speech value. For me, speech value is about, are the ideas developed in an interesting way? Is there original thought? Is there creativity applied? Or do I have the sense that this speech is a repetition of all the other speeches that this speaker has given, or a repetition of material that I think they've read online somewhere? A speech can be well structured, but it can be extremely dull. As well, the value can be irrelevant for the audience. If it's not appropriate, and we'll get to on point 7, as a topic, it just might not have the right value for this audience. We move on to one of the delivery points, physical. How is the speaker's stage presence? Do they move and shake on stage uncontrollably? Are their movements choreographed or are they uncoordinated? Do they use the full range of the stage space that they have? Do they use distance from the camera or from the front row of the speakers, of the audience? And perhaps if there is additional space, do they move into that when they can? And do they seem comfortable there? I'm looking at signs of whether they seem like they're comfortable in their own skin, whether they seem excited and happy to be there. Sort of the general sense of the person. We can also look specifically at body language in terms of gestures. Do they use their hands when speaking? Do their hand gestures make sense, or is it a jumbled mess? Do their body language or do their body gestures stay close to their body, or are they more expansive? And are the gestures different, or do they just repeat themselves over and over again? Let's look at voice. So flexibility and volume in voice are a couple of the tools, as well as, for example, pacing, melody, harmony, which a speaker can choose to play with. I might listen to a speaker and note moments of quietness. And then I'll notice moments where the speaker picks up the volume and perhaps even the pace, and they start to speak much, much faster. And I can notice the impact of that. I can also notice when there is the absence of that. When a speaker speaks in exactly the same tone and exactly the same pace, it becomes very monotonous and boring to follow along with. You see what I mean? When there's no play or dynamism with the voice, a speaker will often lose attention from the audience. Unfortunately, it's something we're used to from a lot of the education system, but as a speaker trying to develop your speaking skills, consider playing more with your voice. Manner. Everyone has a presence on stage, and this ties with their voice, with their physical. Do they seem comfortable? Do they seem like they're an authority? Are they able to express themselves directly, or are they seeming uncomfortable, inconfident, shy on stage? This is, for me, the general sense of the person. The sense of perhaps are they congruent or not with their message. Often this is very intuitive. If I have a sense that something is off, this is the section where I'm thinking about that. Appropriateness. So this is relating to speech value, as mentioned before. Is the speech useful for our audience? Is it right? So, for example, one could speak about grammatical tenses in Korean. But for an audience who speak English and live in London and have no interest in Korea, it could be pretty irrelevant. That speech would be much stronger or better placed, I should say, with an audience who are interested in that topic. Let's go for a slightly different example. Perhaps I come in with a workshop on evaluation, but I present material in the workshop which is too basic. There's no interest there. It's stuff that perhaps the audience already knows. This is very much about having an awareness of where your audience is at, getting a sense of what's their edge. What's the edge of their comfort zone, their knowledge zone? Are they experienced or are they beginners? Do they have an interest in the field that you want to talk about, or is this irrelevant for them? If it's a less relevant subject, I would want to see from the speaker that they find a way to connect it to the everyman, to the person who's there without a specific interest in that topic. How does this connect to a wider human experience? Something like that. Let's talk about correctness. So, every language can be spoken correctly or incorrectly, and this is about making mistakes in the language. If I notice that a speaker, for example, is not a first language English speaker, and I notice they are making recurring mistakes in their usage of language, or perhaps that's the grammar or vocabulary, there seems to be some misunderstanding, or if the material even seems wrong, when I look at the speech value or and the ideas are completely wrong, then that's a point of correctness which I would address. And this is about helping them to improve so that they come back next time stronger. Cool. So, speech development, let's go a little bit deeper. Can your audience follow the structure without effort? There are times when I'm listening to a speaker and I just have no idea what they were supposed to be talking about, whether they're talking about, and where they're going with this. Having a great structure keeps it super easy for the audience, and the absence of that makes it very hard. Very quickly, you can assess whether there was a structure or not, and I would generally trust my gut feeling. If at the start of the speech, a speaker tells me there's going to be a structure, I'm usually trusting that. I look at each section that the speaker brings up, and I'm asking, is this material that's relevant, or do I not need to know this? Recently, I was evaluating a speech. They laid out the purpose of the speech, there was a transition, and then there was a main body and a conclusion, which was all good. The problem, though, was the length of the transition. In a 7-minute speech, they used 3 minutes just transitioning from the opening salvo to the main body of their speech. So much time was lost on something that perhaps just needed a sentence or not to even be mentioned at all. I'm looking at those 3 minutes thinking this is my audience's precious time, and their attention, which I'm throwing away with content which is not getting to the point I need to say. So, is the close as strong as the opening? A lot of people think a lot about the opener of their speech, about their hook. Not so many speakers think about their close. What's the one message I want everyone to take away? What's the recap that brings everything together so that I can leave my audience with a good feeling and a clear message? Oftentimes we think that an audience will comprehend and retain everything we say. In reality, though, audiences are often just remembering a couple of impressions from the speech and a few specific things which you really told them they need to take away. Think back to a couple of speeches you've heard recently. What do you remember about them? Do you remember all the data, or do you remember a clear closing statement? So, looking at effectiveness, would a stranger know the purpose in 60 seconds? If you can't explain the purpose in a sentence, you probably don't know it well enough. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, that's a great test. It's probably too complicated. And what does the speaker want the audience to think, feel, or do differently? Here's my opinion. Every speech needs to have a purpose, and the purpose should be to change the life of the person on the receiving end, to get them to think bigger, to act a little differently, or to reframe some feelings they currently have. And are they meeting that purpose? And then looking at each section in their speech, does it clearly relate to the core purpose, or was the speaker a bit liberal with including that? Should it be just cut, basically? Speech value. So, what's the most interesting idea? You know this straight away, and if there's nothing, there isn't anything. It's just not that interesting. Would this be worth reading as an essay? One way of thinking about speeches that I find useful is that speeches are spoken essays. They, in my opinion, can be developed and use a lot of the similar techniques. They just have an element of a physical and verbal delivery. And is the speaker's own voice coming through? This one is especially important in 2026 because AI is massive. And I often sit in speeches noticing a sense in me that something is not quite right about this speech that I'm listening to. It just seems slightly artificial. It seems like the speaker didn't really think about what they wanted to say, and they've just asked their favorite AI companion to tell them what to say. The speaker's view, their perspective, their lens, how they see things is a huge interest aspect for what makes speaking so valuable. If I wanted to just listen to AI, I could turn on audio mode and listen. No, I want to hear the speaker's view. Let's look at physical. So you might have the appearance, you might have body language, the use of space. Does their body reinforce or does it contradict what's being said? So let's say I'm talking about confidence, but my arms are crossed and I'm speaking in a kind of low voice and I'm averting my gaze and you get the idea. I'm not communicating with my body in a way that is cohesive or coherent, I should say, with the message I'm trying to give. Perhaps if I want to persuade people in a new direction that I want to take us all in, I need to have a sense of confidence, a sense of certainty about me. If I want to talk about how interesting something is, I should be curious, I should be excited. And if I'm getting from someone's body the sense that they are just not even interested in talking about it, there's an incoherence. It doesn't match up. Where does the speaker look when they're making key points? So, eye contact is important, and the ability to sustain eye contact for, let's say, 4 to 6 seconds, sort of the length of a thought, is extremely valuable. When speakers are looking away, they might seem distracted, And after a while, you get the sense that something is a bit weird about them. Something's off. Like, are my fingernails more interesting than talking to you? No. If a speaker's on stage, I'm expecting them to look at and engage with the audience. I don't want to see them looking at the screen, for example. Now, are their gestures natural or performed? So, this is, for me, a debatable point, but scripted gestures read as authentic, inauthentic, and the general gist of all of these points is that we want expression to be authentic as well as coherent, so that it's coming up naturally in a way which matches how we feel and how we think about what we're talking about. We're looking at a cohesive connection between how we speak, how we show up, how we act, how we appear in front of our audience. And I think about a speech I did recently where I put my gestures over the top. I did big gestures. And this is where my bone to pick is with this point. I think that sometimes there is an element of performance which is required because I am there to perform. I'm not there to just have a conversation with everyone. Speaking is different than having conversations. And to show up and have an audience of some 100 or 300 people, I want to elevate my energy, my gestures. Everything about me should be that much bigger to match the audience's interest in me, the size and scale of the event. If I had 300 people watching me, I would speak differently than if it was a one-on-one introverted conversation about some deep topic. So, voice. Does their voice change? Or are they flatlining the whole way through? Monotone is extremely common, especially with technical people. If you think you're a technical person, assume that you have a monotonicity problem. Flat vocals make material boring. Look at how you can introduce some pauses, vary your tone, maybe go quiet. Play with how you speak. It'll make it so much more interesting and it creates an experience for your listener. You might have used a Windows PC 15 or 20 years ago and it used to come with a narrator function built in. You could get it to play text. And I remember asking it to read text snippets out and it would read out text at exactly the right rate or that I set it to, with no emphasis on any particular words, no pauses, and it sounded so strange. We see it a bit at the moment with AI videos. You can tell when a video is off because of strange pausing, strange pacing of words, or a lack of emphasis where we expect it. Do key points land with pause and wait? You can just tell. See what I did there? You can just tell when a speaker is thinking intentionally about how to pause and how to drop weight on something. For example, let's say I mention someone important to me has passed away. If the speaker jumps straight into the next thing, giving it no moment, there's no experience of the emotion there. That's a coachable point. So, manner. Does the speaker believe what they're saying? Are they coherent? And this comes across with the voice, with the physical as well. We can see when someone is inauthentic. Is their nervousness getting in the way? Does it undermine their perhaps amazing CV and technical prowess? It's when nervousness comes up in a way which isn't controlled. That's when it tends to become a problem. One of the most helpful reframes for me was realizing that nervousness is just uncontrolled excitement. And if we reframe it, nervousness, but in a positive way, using it to help us, it's just excitement. And is their enthusiasm contagious or draining? You already know those one or two individuals, perhaps speakers, perhaps friends, who have too much energy all the time. Perhaps they are dominating the audience, perhaps they're performative, and it gets in the way. It becomes a problem which takes me out of connection as a coach with the speaker. If it's affecting me, it could well be affecting the whole audience. Appropriateness. So, does this speech work in a different context, or is it calibrated to this one? This is about audience awareness. Does the speaker know who they're talking to? Generic speeches are, less respectful. They didn't take time to get to know us. Does the speaker seem to know who they're talking to? If you present very basic material to very credible, high-level people, they're not going to see you as particularly interesting. It's not worth their time. And humor, formality, complexity, are they at the right levels at the right times? Often, for example, technical people, engineers will bring in a lot of complexity. But if you're speaking to someone in sales or marketing, that complexity is not in the right place. Correctness. So here's one I missed earlier. Patterns of language, like ahs, ums, fillers. You can't even call them language sometimes. But a lot of people use phrases and sounds rather than pausing, rather than getting to their point. And it reduces how credible they sound. They sound unprofessional. They sound immature sometimes when they use words like or Does the vocabulary match their natural vocabulary? Again, here's another AI-related point. If you hear them saying words that you don't think you've ever heard them say in their whole lives, then it feels a bit like they're reading from a script, or they've prepared material which they didn't actually work on too much themselves. And then, is anything mispronounced? I had an example of this, but I forget it right now. But when a speaker uses a word which is just being said wrong, let's think of a good one. I haven't got it right now. But when you use a word incorrectly again and again, it becomes extremely distracting. And audiences will begin to listen out for it rather than stay present and connected and follow along with what you're saying. We can understand when someone's not an English language first speaker, but if it's becoming a problem, it's becoming a problem, and it's not about the person, it's about correcting the behavior, correcting a mistake, so that the speaker can develop and have a better speech next time. Cool. Best speakers are made, they're not born. No one knows all of this stuff when they begin speaking, and it is a journey for all of us. Coaching is a gift, and I'll talk more about this in a different video. Remember, there are 8 dimensions. Every one of them is coachable, and you can check out Toastmasters or watch this video again for more information on how to improve each of those points. Hope you enjoyed this video. Give me some feedback. Would love to hear from you, and I hope this helps.